Hey, folks, thanks for joining us for another episode of Construction Over Coffee. I have here with me today Sara Magallón. She is an assistant project development engineer over at GSI, Geostabilization International. Been really looking forward to this one. Sara, great to have you on the show.
Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. Let's start the show. Tell us a little bit about who you are, how you got to where you're at today. Give us a synopsis of your life, your journey up to this point.
Yeah, I'm a bit of a nomad and finally established some roots here in the South. Originally from Loyal Heights, East LA, Los Angeles, in California, born and raised there. Pursued my degree in civil engineering and environmental engineering in UC Davis in Northern California near Sacramento. Worked in the Bay Area for 7 years, San Francisco, everything between Sacramento to San Jose and in between. Decided that it was time to get my master's and what should have been a 2 to 3 year work experience, and then pursue my master's turned into 7 years naturally. And sure. Yeah, found a perfect university with the degree that I was looking for in Montana. So I moved to Butte, Montana, a town of 30,000, which was the size of my university, and received my master's there in geological engineering. And then that's where I learned about GSI. I loved what they did, and I moved to the South, specifically just the Southeast, and then eventually settled in Chattanooga, Tennessee. Came in as a project engineer, and then have transitioned now to an associate project development engineer.
Cool. Awesome. We were kind of poking around your bio before. Seems like you're really a outdoor oriented individual.
Yes. Naturally. Yeah. I pride myself in having lived in all three mountain ranges now. California, the Sierras, Montana, the Rockies, and then now the Appalachian Range.
Nice. Cool. That's interesting. I saw fly fishing, dogs, rugby with Australian rules. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, well, so not rugby, Australian rules football, AFL.
Excuse me. Yeah. Australian rules football. Is that footy?
Yes,
right?
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
I even traveled to Australia to represent the U.S. women's side and played against 7 other countries.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Tell us about that. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, growing up, sports have always been a big part of my life, and I'm grateful for that because I take so much of my sports background to my work life. I'm always working in a team. It's never just me. So I encourage everybody to, if you can, play a team sport or encourage children to do so. It really has changed my life and provided a lot of opportunities and kept me healthy. But yeah, I started playing in San Francisco in 2013 and then kept playing as I moved. And in 2017 had the opportunity to try out for the national team, and I did it and traveled to Australia for about a month and played out there. And this was right before grad school, so everything lined up really well, and literally flew back the day before grad school started.
Wow, it's a long flight.
Yes.
When I followed footy, I was cheering for I think the most hated team in Australia, which was Collingwood at the team. Collingwood, they wore the black shirts, and my thesis was, well, they're the best, of course I'm going to root for them. But yeah, I guess they weren't well liked.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about your work over at GSI, what you're doing right now, what a day in the life might look like.
Yeah. So at GSI, I really like that there isn't a set schedule. We are an emergency response company, design build company. And so with that, sometimes my week can be in the office, working on proposals, helping the engineering design team, talking to clients. or I'm doing a site visit. I get a call from a client and I have to drive anywhere between 1 to 3 or 4 hours for maybe an hour long site visit. And I collect the information, I talk to the clients, and then I come back and uh, team up with our engineering design team. And then we put a design together and write a proposal and, do the estimate and then send it out to the client. So there isn't no week I think has ever been the same here. And initially I started off as a project engineer with my experience in the field prior to joining GSI. Having earned my master's, I came into the design team on the engineering side, spent most of my time in the field, which you know, entry level at GSI, but having 7 years of experience, I think it's very important for young engineers to understand you need that field experience. I came from a consulting background going into design build where we're designing it in the office and then going out in the field and constructing it. So you have to understand how equipment works, the limitations of our crews, of our equipment. And so it was great to see that, understand everything. And then now in the position that I'm in, I really feel comfortable speaking to clients regarding what we can do, how we can fix things.
And that's interesting too. I'm guessing it just must have been so different than where you started in your career compared to where you're at now.
Yeah, as a consultant, you kind of a lot of things are designed, in the office, and then the general contractor goes out and builds it, and then we kind of are doing some of the observation to make sure that they're following what we provided in the design. And then at that point, if something is not going correctly, then I can't necessarily make the change right there and then. I have to collect the information, go back to the office, process things, and there's a lot of back and forth, which is fine in projects that are long term. Some of our projects average anywhere between like 2 to 3 days to 2 to 3 months, even longer. So on those jobs, on average, maybe like a week or two. On those jobs, being the design build contractor, then it's exciting to be able to make a phone call, sometimes go out, drive an hour to get service and make a phone call. We're in remote places. Talk to your engineering team, make sure that everybody's on the same page. They, jump on their computer, make the design, call you, everything's good. And then you go back in the field and implement those changes immediately. So I like that. I like that speed. I like that that ownership, really.
No. Now, how did you find the company you're with today? What was that transition like?
Yeah, I actually had never heard of GSI prior to going to Montana Technological University. I missed a career fair because I was a TA and I had students that needed help right before a test. So I was being a good person and stayed behind. I should have kicked them out, but it's okay. I hope they passed. And then, yeah, so I had a really good friend that did an internship with them and she loved it. I did an internship at a mine. My university was known for producing a lot of mining engineers and naturally also geological engineering. You tend to kind of go into structural geology at mines. I knew I didn't want to go back into consulting, and so I kind of wanted to see what my degree could look like at a mine. I think the idea of going to the same site day in and day out just wasn't for me. I like to experience different things and travel, I just couldn't. It was cool, but it just wasn't for me. And I talked to my friend, and she mentioned that she loved her internship, and I started doing some more research at GSI, and I was also really into rock mechanics, and so they had their rockfall division, and I reached out to a couple of people via LinkedIn with the rockfall department and connected with them and hit it off, and before you know it, I'm flying to Atlanta for an interview.
Wow, cool. Now let's touch on that too, because one of the things that we're seeing a lot of change and attention to is bringing women into the AEC world, the architecture, engineering, construction. um, there's a farly disproportionate amount um, of women in those industries, far more men than women. So I'm curious, how did you become so interested in that, and how was that presented to you as a career path? Was it something that you knew you wanted to do when you were younger, or was it something that you started exploring as you were older? Let's talk about that.
Yeah. So growing up, um, so both my parents are from Mexico, and I was born in Los Angeles. I grew up speaking Spanish, and I actually struggled to learn English, and now it's vice versa. But um, so with that, I felt that I naturally took after numbers and science, more of like the hands-on activities in school. Um, and I continued to excel in math and science. And I loved the joke in the family is that my parents couldn't keep me clean because I was always covered in dirt. And now we laugh because I play in dirt and rocks all day and get paid for it. Um,
Right.
so naturally, I was just inclined to do that, to be outside and play in nature. And so when I got to high school, I had my 11th grade physics teacher was a mechanical engineer and worked at NASA. And so in our physics class, he exposed us to the different types of engineering.
Hmm.
Back then, I wanted to save the world from climate change. And so I was looking into becoming an environmental engineer. And then, and I also had a high school teacher, my calculus BC teacher who was awesome and provided a lot of resources for us to excel in our AP exams and all that stuff. And so when I went to college, I knew I wanted to pursue engineering. When I looked at programs, there wasn't just environmental, there was like civil and environmental engineering. And
Hmm.
so I applied to UC Davis. And then I think in your first introductory class, they kind of go civil and environmental being kind of the umbrella for a lot of other things. I learned about geotechnical engineering, transportation, structural, and geotechnical. Naturally, I was like, it combines geology and engineering. It made sense. So right there, freshman year, I knew that I signed up for all the geotechnical engineering classes. Signed up. I did undergraduate research uh, with the civil and environmental engineering, focusing in geotech. Um, and then I went straight to work into at Langen Engineering, right into the field, logging pores and borings and all that stuff. And I haven't done anything different. I've known geotech was my thing since day one.
Awesome. So what we find is a lot of people, and thank you for sharing that story. That's really cool. But we find a lot of people that get into these industries that come from all walks of life. It's usually either they have someone in their family or direct network, like social circle, that is in there, or they have someone, um, they have someone in their life at some point that kind of orients them towards it. It sounds like you were always naturally curious and maybe predispositioned to that, and you also had individuals along the way that kind of reinforced or reaffirmed that decision for you. Is that a safe one to assume?
Yes, yes. My parents don't have any formal education, maybe second or third grade. Hardest working people I know, and we
Sure.
always had a roof over our head, but they sell tacos for a living. So not they're the engineers of tacos, if you will. But
Cool.
yeah, didn't really have that. I hear that story a lot, like my dad, my grandfather was an engineer, and that's great. Really, it is great. And
Mhm.
it's so cool that they can have that conversation at the dinner table. It's a little different in my household.
Sure. I hear that. Um, it's interesting too. I'm sure, as as a woman in these industries, you you may have learned along the way that sometimes it's not such a welcoming place. It may not feel like such a inclusive place. Um, so I'm curious, what advice do you have for women out there that want to get into this industry, that want to pursue this? How do they do that? What's the best way to get involved with that?
Yeah. Obviously, like the first thing I noticed when I went to school, in our civil classes, like there was a handful of women. And um, sometimes when you look a little different, you notice and you pick up on those things.
Yeah,
It's not that I'm looking for it, you pick up on it. I stood out, a minority woman in these classes. Um, but I don't know why. I love challenges. I not necessarily wanted to prove a point, but it's like I was very passionate about this degree, and at times it wasn't easy and people just didn't understand or couldn't relate, but I just persevered and pushed forward. Um, I like to take my differences and try to use that as um and also like my experience to excel. Um, I don't know. It you notice the differences, and at this point it doesn't bother me that much, and I'm getting oh uh yeah I guess advice I would give is just just roll with it. Like it's not easy, um but if that's something that you want to do, then you continue um moving forward.
yeah. Thank you for sharing that. How can the industry as a whole and other people and men in these industries, how can they make it a more welcoming, supportive place?
um I obviously being in this industry and not having too many people that look like me in higher positions, I've been very fortunate to have a lot of champions, being men, and they've supported me, provided resources, have empathized and understood, maybe why I'm struggling a little bit more than someone else. And that's been awesome. And it's a lot of those champions that have led to the success of where I'm at now. And it hasn't been easy. And then there's been others that weren't champions. And you kind of just you you work through that, and then you hope that you don't have to deal with it again, or that someone else doesn't have to deal with that. But unfortunately, that's the reality, and you
Oh,
learn to deal with that. I kind of I knew what I was getting myself into going into this career, and again, it's that I don't like the easy route, and so I feel like I thrive in those challenging moments, and with a level head and I think a little bit more empathy than others, I can understand maybe why they think that the way that they're thinking, and try to take a step back and just kind of be like, you know what, they don't know any better, they don't understand, they haven't been exposed to someone like me before.
mhm.
And so I try to be the more reasonable person, and the bigger person, and try to move past whatever conflicts or situations.
Ignorance, ignorance is ugly, and unfortunately, it's widespread, regardless of industry. And we hear from a lot of different people that there's certainly champions and supportive people along the way. And then there's people on the complete opposite side of the spectrum that almost feel like they're working to conspire against you in some way. And I think it's a tough situation to be in. And I'm glad to see you came out on top with a good perspective. Um, Along the way, you've probably met it sounds like you've met some great people along the way. If you're looking at people and, picture yourself 5, 10 years ago, what career advice would you give to somebody 5 or 10 years ago? in your shoes?
Yeah, like things are not going to be handed on a silver platter. It
Mhm.
takes work, and like if you really want it, you have to understand. Um, with time comes experience, and that is really valuable. And so, kind of like be patient, and if you really work for it, then you can get to where you want. Like I'm still at, I think, in this, I've been in this industry for 12, 13 years now. Like I think I'm excited to see what the future holds. I'm still
Mhm.
working and learning every day. I'm still learning. I don't think I know everything. And so it's just always you're always learning. And remember that from early on in your career until adulthood. And really also what I learned a lot too is just being able to mentor and help others, either younger or older. You can learn from both spectrums.
Got it. And for you, what are your plans for the future hold? What direction do you see yourself taking your career?
Um, there's definitely growth within GSI for me in this
Cool.
position. I want to feel a little bit more comfortable at tech and in project development. I've mostly been on the construction side, the design side, in the field, and now I've kind of changed gears a little bit into project development, and and so that's different for me. I still have a lot to learn on the business side, contracts, learning how to work with clients, and
Mhm.
just a lot of more of the business side that I didn't realize that I would be at this point. So a lot of growth
Sure.
there. Um, yeah, and then we'll see.
Cool. So getting people and thanks for sharing that, Sarah. Getting people into the trades is something we're really passionate about on this show. And I think a lot of folks in the AEC world are passionate about it too. They may not talk about it, but I think it's unspoken knowledge that there's not enough folks in those industries. Um, it seems like the pool of qualified folks gets smaller and smaller each year. And a lot of the firms we talk to, they're desperate for the right people. And I think there's a lot of reasons behind why the pool is it's just not as large as other industries, and there's a multitude of reasons. Um, what can you see? What can you see companies doing? What would you like to see companies doing to attract more individuals into the trades, into the AEC world? What can
Yeah,
folks be doing?
I I totally see that. Um, I feel like historically there's been a hard push of like you need to go to a 4-year university and
Hmm.
you need to get a degree and
Yep.
um, but sometimes like I came from an inner city school where high school dropout rates were over 50%. Like these kids um are and financial, right? Financial issues. Luckily, back when I was applying to college, there was still I mean FAFSA is still around now, but there's a lot more financial support and loans and grants and scholarships and all that. But I think it's important. Also, funding in high schools aren't there anymore for like the machine shop or ceramics or other trades that used to be available in schools.
Mhm.
Um, Whenever I love to volunteer and talk back and provide my time to speak to middle school students. I even talk to elementary students, and like they might not have any idea like what I'm talking about, but then I have cool pictures and they're like, oh, that looks cool. Even just exposure in that and letting them know like, hey, you don't have to be an engineer. I talk about different trades that can still get you in the realm of AEC and get you in the realm of construction. And some of them are like, oh, my dad works construction, and
Mhm.
so you can relate in that sense. But just the more that if you have a platform and a
Mhm.
voice to be able to talk to others, I think it's important to use that. Um, and just ensure younger generations that school isn't for everybody. And but I think it's important to still choose something that's going to help you succeed. And, there's money in the trades. It's a skilled labor force. And I think it's very important that everybody talks about it, not just folks that are in the trades. At GSI, we are a military friendly company, and we have a lot of programs where we work
Mhm.
with folks that are transitioning from military and doing trade schools and coming out to work at GSI. And so, I'd like to take the opportunity to go speak to some of those programs as well, and just exposure, and really just using the platform and your voice to be able to let others know that there are other opportunities.
Sure. Agreed. Agreed. I know GSI, y'all have a really strong veterans recruitment program, support program, and that's great. It's a great pool to pull from. We look at when we're talking about, why is the awareness, why is the education, why is the conversation of getting folks into the industry, why is it just not happening and what's missing? And a great experiment I'll often encourage people to do is, if you can go into a classroom and get 50, 100 middle school or high school aged individuals together, you run an experiment. Say, hey, if you want to raise your hand if you want to be a doctor when you grow up. A ton of hands will go up. Raise your hand if you want to go into banking and finance, into legal, whatever it may be, into tech. All these hands go up, right? And then you say, okay, well, where's your hand if you want to be a mechanic? People kind of look around, what? If you want to be an engineer, oh, a non, computer engineer, uh, estimator, superintendent, I mean, you're lucky if you get a hand or two. And that same enthusiasm and excitement that exists, that will pull kids into one industry or the other, it just doesn't seem as present or as strong for the AEC industry. There's a multitude of reasons for that. You nailed it, where there was this big push to get people to go to college for the last 10, 20 years or so. And I'm not dissing college, it certainly has its place, but there are some folks, I think a lot of folks, that may be better served going right into trade school or going to the tech instead of um, a traditional high school. And I just don't, those options are certainly available, but I think they're kind of stigmatized in a way. When I was growing up, it was, if you went to the trade school, or excuse me, if you went to the tech, it was because they said it was because you were less than. Now, we know that's not true, but that was the stigma that existed. And, when you're aged, call it somewhere between 12 and 18, you're pretty impressionable and influenced by your peer group and adults, those around you. So I think that's one great place to start, is generating buzz and excitement and enthusiasm for those alternative career paths, and maybe not even looking at them as alternative career paths, but one and the same as maybe a traditional schooling path.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And even
So,
to take it a step further, I think just um a little bit, we're not getting the pool of people in these careers, whether it's the AEC or the trades.
mm-hmm,
There's just been this lack of interest in STEM fields in general, from younger
mm-hmm,
generations, let alone female interest. I feel like it has increased just because now, we're normalizing having women in these industries in STEM, which is awesome.
mm-hmm,
But a lot still stems even further back, like when we're born, we're given like dolls if you're a girl, and like toy trucks if you're a boy.
mm-hmm,
And so it really stems to all that. And like, I'm that annoying aunt. I have 7 nieces, and I'm that annoying aunt that will not buy them dolls. Either it's like practical gifts, you need new shoes, clothes, I'm
Sure.
there. You're playing sports, I'll get you that. You need puzzles or other supplies for school. More of that, just kind of, I remember one time I picked out a sweater for my niece and it was blue and she's like, "Oh, that's a boy color." And I was like, "Says who?" And so
Yep.
just being able to provide those small examples, um, and I think more people need to learn to separate some of those stereotypes of like female, all this other stuff. But
Hmm.
I growing up a tomboy, naturally it helped me progress into feel a little bit more confident getting into this field. But exposure, you don't realize it, but like you said, 12 to 18 years of age, you seem the kids are very impressionable, and that's when they're grasping, maybe start thinking what they want to pursue after high school. But even as early, if we can personally choose to, say certain things or influence others at an earlier age, I think that's like super important as well.
Agreed. I don't think people realize how strong stereotypes are, especially at a young age, as they just continue to be reinforced. Oh, you're this, so we're going to give you that. You're that, so we're going to give you this. And this is the direction we're going to push you and shape you, and the direction that we're going to try to influence your life. It's a really good point. It's a really good point. Um, it's interesting too, like you look at those traditional stereotypes and you think of something as simple as, oh, giving a doll to, you know, a young girl. Well, what if she doesn't like dolls? And you're just saying, hey, well, here, play with this. Well, what do I do with this? I'd rather play with maybe a Lego set or something. And I think that's something to consider and keep an open mind about for sure. Um, you know, on I think another barrier to entry over the last 10, 15 years or so, you graduated with your bachelor's in 2010. That was 1 or 2 years after the worst of the financial crisis was over. And a lot of folks that I talked to during that time, if they were especially in, architecture, a lot of the new work was slowed down. It was all mostly existing projects for the most part that was still in process. Um, what was it like entering the working world after that chaos? It was like, bam, hit you over the head with the hammer. Here you go. Here's your degree. Good
Yeah,
luck.
yeah, man. That was rough. I thought I had friends graduating. I was part of um a Chicano and Latino engineering club at UC
Mm,
Davis, which uh changed my life there at and really helped me get through engineering at school. And it was a group of engineers and scientists with Latino backgrounds. So it's like you had a little bit of a familia there, if you will. But I had friends that were graduating engineering 2008, 2009 and couldn't find a job. And so I was like, oh man, I'm gonna stay in school. I'm gonna go straight into grad school.
sure.
And then, so I did a lot of undergraduate research. I didn't end up doing any internships when I was in undergrad. I was one, working, and two, I minored in engineering geology. So, and I wanted to get out in 4 years. So I was constantly taking classes and working every summer during undergrad. And when I was like, okay, the market started getting better. There was like, rumors they were looking for a lot of entry level engineers. And then obviously I stayed in touch with geotechs, and construction was booming in the San Francisco Bay Area. I changed gears and I was like, no, I'm ready. I'm tired of school. Like I never had a summer break. I never had a summer vacation. From high school up until I graduated, every summer I was either working or in school. And so I was like, I'm ready to go work. And luckily through my network, one of my undergraduate researching mentors knew someone in the industry, and she connected me with her, and I interviewed. And at that point I interviewed, and I was like, oh, I'm sorry, I still, for my engineering geology minor, I had a field class where I had to go camp and learn about soils and rocks. And I told them, I'll be done later at a month or two after summer. And they were a little discouraged. But then I interviewed again, and I was like, oh, yeah, I learned how to log soils and rocks. And they're like, when can you start? And within the first week, I was behind a drill rig logging soil samples. Um,
Wow.
so yeah, and yeah, so right after that, it was nonstop busy. I was working like 70 to 80 hours a week right out of college. I was like, wait a second. I went and I got an engineering degree to come out and work 80 hours a week. Um, so that was rough, but man, I look back now and I'm like, I wouldn't have it any other way. And it really built that work ethic, that experience, and just being comfortable in some difficult situations. And it's helped me now. But I was very concerned about not being able to find a job. But luckily, it was at the right time. I was at the right time at the right place. Bay Area, tech boom, building all of San Francisco's foundations and doing all that stuff. With Langan, I was able to travel to Peru, do a project there. I traveled to Hawaii and to Montana, and then that's how I fell in love with Montana and found um, my university to get my master's.
Wow. That's a cool story. Um, when did you start seeing work pick back up and things start to normalize in a sense after that? How long did it take?
I feel like I was in a bubble in San Francisco, and just with the tech boom at that time in around 2010. So
Hmm.
it was nonstop, right? I mean, I started work like August of 2010, and it was nonstop, and I couldn't believe it. And I think it was more, I left the Bay Area in 2017. It wasn't as busy as the early years in 2010, right after 2010, but there's always work in that area. And then in true construction fashion, it's seasonal. So like right now, we're getting very busy, doing site visits, getting calls and everything. And so, and then winter, it slows down a little bit. But in the South, you don't have snow, so you keep working.
Let's talk about recruitment ideas.
Mhm.
I know that's something the folks over at GSI are really passionate about as well. Um, if share what you can, of course, but what are y'all doing for recruitment? And is there anything that you're personally doing for recruitment?
Yeah, we obviously the basic stuff is attending career fairs and trying to really capture the students in their early years. Our internship program is awesome. I've been on the other end, uh, trying to get a job, and then on the interviewing end. And obviously, the interviewing end is a lot more fun. But I don't sugarcoat anything, and I think we're very hands on here at GSI, and so I think that is very intriguing for young engineers. So the career fair route, we do attend. I actually recently attended a conference in San Francisco called Groundbreaking Women in Construction. And that was super awesome to see so many women in different positions within the AEC world. And so that was also an opportunity to meet women and get exposure in that sense. Um, and then personally, I have a lot of friends that are teachers, and so anytime it's career day, we do. So I'll do like a presentation and do a virtual presentation with pictures and videos, um, to then connect with students. And it's really important for me. A lot of my friends are out west and in California, where there's a large Latino population, and so these classes are tend to have a little bit more minority students. And
Mhm.
so I think it's really important that they can see someone that, I remind them, I grew up there. Like my parents used to sell tacos on, 4th Street in East LA, Boyle Heights. And uh, to see someone that grew up where they grew up, that looks like them, be able to travel and do some cool projects, I think that's super important. And so I'm looking to find a network here of teachers and a local school so that I can go talk to students in person and continue to do those recruitment efforts.
Got it. Got it. And then when you look at, I think the industry as a whole, right, outside of recruitment, outside of everything we talked about, what are some of the biggest opportunities that you see? We'll talk specifically in your industry, in your world, and what are the biggest opportunities you see for improvement as well?
Yeah. Um, that's hard, man. Like the, at one point, there's only so much industry can do, universities can do, um, unless students or young professionals want it for themselves.
Hmm.
Like, um, again, there's like no free handouts. You got to work hard, but
Hmm.
I think just continuing to nowadays, like social media, it can be used for good and bad, and we can promote some really cool stuff. What we do, people don't realize, like, and kind of skipping ahead here a little bit, but like our niche of within even geotechnical engineering, like what we do at GSI, people are like, you fix landslides and rock falls, and it's like,
Much.
who, yeah, like how did you get into that, or like what, like how does one get into that? And you sort of stumble upon it, but I mean, it's there. It's been a like there's been work in this. Like someone has to fix them, right?
Yeah,
Um,
I do.
and so it and then you can't just like share all these different options that like younger generations can, or like students can, um different options. Like I think about certain jobs that are so particular. It's like how does someone get into that? And so um all in all, it just really takes, you want the people that want it for themselves. And all we can do is try to provide a couple of resources, announcements on social media, word of mouth goes a long way, attending conferences, um, in passing, having conversations. You never know how that can spark. And I also like to just make myself a resource with, if I ever meet clients or meet like random people and they know someone or have a child that's like semi interested, it's like become a resource. Like I don't mind sharing my information and talking to them, and or meeting up for coffee or something like that. I love sharing what I do for a living. I'm very passionate about it. It's a fun industry if you're into this. So the more that I can have those personalized conversations, then that's that's kind of like how I end up doing it. But uh,
I think people are going to draw a lot of inspiration from listening to this. It's good to hear your story. Good to hear people who have been there and done it.
yeah, yeah, no, I love it. A lot of hard work, but
Yeah, yeah. Nothing's ever just going to come to you just
no,
because. But hard work does create luck and opportunity.
yeah,
I notice the luckiest people are often to the hardest working by far.
yeah, no. And I've just recently, it's that hard work, and the recent people coming out of school, they had it hard too with COVID online. Like I can't, finishing school online, like I just can't. So I try to empathize with our
Hmm.
younger engineers, and it's not of like I had it hard, so you have to have it hard.
Sure.
It's not that. We didn't have similar situations, like even outside of school, taking aside, take out like personal stuff, like
Yeah.
school, like
Yeah.
that sucks. Like I can barely stay awake for like a 1 hour meeting. Like God, imagine a class, like 2 years of school.
Uh,
Um, so I try to empathize. I try to set up things to help them manage their time, complete their tasks, and it's not just an expectation like, hey, I need this done. I don't care. I need this done now. It so but sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. And so now it's like, okay, how can I spin this? I do a lot of uh like professional development, like growth to learn how to speak to people because you don't know their background. And so I try not to take things personally. I try to step back and understand why they might be saying certain things. And I think that's helped me a lot to not feel targeted, not feel that they're saying that because I'm a minority woman in this industry,
Mhm.
um, because that's just like not healthy and it hasn't helped. Like it sucks. I'm not a people pleaser, like, bend over backwards for everybody. Like I'm firm, but it's being strategic and knowing how to talk to people and ask things, or even ask for help when needed. And I think that's we can tie this into why we need to diversify the workforce because everybody has an ego, but I think having women brings a different perspective to the situation, to a problem. And so diversifying your group, your team will bring in different ideas, um, different perspectives that because like I didn't grow up working under the hood of a car in the garage with my dad, right? So that
Mhm.
that one train of thought of like that's how I'm gonna fix something isn't gonna work for the solution. But hey, you know what? I had an issue with something else and we tried X, Y, and Z, but maybe we do this whole loop around and then it's more difficult, but we'll find a solution. And so I think that that diverse field, perspectives by having a different group and not just men and women, but just different ages, different professional backgrounds, cultures. That's all important to find a solution.
Certainly is. The comparison I'll often make to people that don't get that, I try to say it to them in a way they can understand and relate to. It's fairly similar. If you're, the highest performing teams we see, if you're trying to solve a really complex problem, for example, you don't just have a group of architects in the room. You don't just have a group of soups in the room. You don't just have a group of engineers in the room. You have people with different experiences that do different things, and that's pretty comparable to like walks of life and things like that. That's a way they may be able to understand it. You don't just solve it with one type of person and one type of individual. You rely on input from people with different experience, and I think the same can be said for what you're mentioning too. Substitute architect, engineer, superintendent for anything else outside of a job title.
Yeah,
And that's how, I think that's a way where people can understand it and start to grasp it, because there are unfortunately just some people that don't get it. They just won't.
yeah. And like I have a dude, bless my colleagues. They can explain things and visualize it and like immediately. And and that's awesome. And I feel dumb because like I haven't seen it. I
Mhm.
I just don't sometimes don't think that way. And I have to ask, like, explain it a different way. Like, I'm sorry, can you draw me a sketch or whatever? So now, and they don't get frustrated. So awesome. They probably do, but don't tell me, but that's fine. And um when I run into a similar situation and like if I'm getting annoyed or frustrated, I have to understand like I I've been in that situation. So like how else can I explain it um so that someone else can visualize it and understand the situation. And once it clicks for them, then maybe they have that solution. And so um um, this takes me back working in teams, sports. Like you have to be able to work with everybody else's skill set to make a winning team. And I think we do that well here at GSI, and then in this in general in this industry.
It's awesome. It's awesome. I think we covered everything. I want to And I want to say thanks on behalf of it. It's going to be watching this. Um,
Yeah,
this is
yeah, no,
great.
glad I could contribute.
Yeah. Are there any closing thoughts that you might have that you want to share with folks?
No, just this is an awesome industry. And the route for anybody that wants to pursue something like this and it seems tough, uh it's a bumpy road, and it's always going to be a bumpy road. And and there's going to be the lows and the highs, and you just kind of you ride that roller coaster. And if there's something you're passionate about, at some point, I'm not quite sure when things clicked for me, but it took some work, a lot of work. And I think that's normal for some of us.
Certainly. If people want to reach you, what's a good way for them to reach you? You're on LinkedIn, so
Yeah,
LinkedIn's probably good.
yeah, LinkedIn. I mean, if it's like a younger crowd, I'm trying to think. I don't know if I want to like put my email on blast or anything.
Don't do it.
Or is there a way to like direct?
Don't do email or phone.
Yeah, is
Yeah.
there a way to like connect to you guys and then to
Yeah,
connect to me?
absolutely.
Yeah,
We'll filter that for you.
yeah. No, but if there's ever, yeah, and then either email or that works. Email.
Cool. Well, thanks again for coming on the show. Will
Yeah,
be
thanks.
my pleasure.